Whatever Next Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. And here's my next guest, Mark Smalley, prolific author helping IT people understand service. Welcome to the Whatever Next Unplugged podcast. This is where we lift the lid on what's happening in transformations. And I'm really excited to have Mark Smalley on the episode today. He's a prolific writer. I'm sure many of you listening have got at least one of these types of books on your bookshelf. And Mark, you are constantly coming out with new books, new content, new insight, and inspiring everyone with what you do. Mark, we met on LinkedIn, bizarrely enough. I was posting about experience, you were posting about experience, and we just got connected. And I was honoured when you asked me to be your co-author on the ITIL experience book that's just gone live. And we had a fab time pulling that book together. So I'm pleased that you've agreed to come on the Transformation Show today.
It's a great pleasure.
This is a podcast about transformation. It's about lifting the lid. So tell me, why should people be investing, especially in experience, when it comes to the transformations that they take on and do?
It's a tricky one because you can only spend your budget once, and there are currently so many things that you could and probably should spend your budget on. Just mention a few. Think about AI, of course, where the question is how not to lose a race nobody chose to run. We sort of ended up in this AI thing. Not only an economic but a societal race that we didn't choose. You're not going to win it, but you don't want to lose it. So you've got to spend budget on that. Cyber security, of course, we're under
Big
attack.
one.
National infrastructure, power, finance, healthcare, water, stuff like that. What's going to break first and when? So that's got a high priority. Close to that, you got thinking about geopolitics. Supply chains. We built supply chains when the world cooperated with each other, and now the world stopped cooperating. You've got to pick a side. Whose side do you want? Which side of the fracture? Because you're such vulnerable as far as supply chains are concerned. Where's your data sovereignty, stuff like that? Sustainability is another one. We made promises to the planet and to the shareholders when the gap between the two seemed reconcilable, but now that's under pressure. So, whose promise are we going to break? So we compete, and could mention other things as well, but these are the kind of forces we're dealing with. So why invest in this luxury of delighting people? Because some people talk about experience in terms of delight. But I'd like to frame it differently. I'd like to frame it in terms of trust and legitimacy of organizations. Because just as an example, when you're waiting on the phone in line for a service desk, and you hear that statement, your call is important to us, your reaction, Lisa, says it all. You're losing. You don't believe them. So I'd frame investing in experience as investing in your legitimacy, that you're taken seriously. That's the case as far as I'm concerned.
I definitely see that. I think anyone who, businesses, organizations, charities, they don't have an endless pot of money, and they have to prioritize where they invest. And you're right. Right now, there's all the AI trends, there's the geopolitical challenges, and there's probably a whole heap of technical debt that they're having to recover from, believing that one day they would have the money to address that technical debt. Experience could be viewed as another angle, but you're so right that your call is important to us, and you're currently call number 75 is, it often sounds a bit at odds. So, what's the end game with some of this stuff? I mean, if I'm leading a transformation program, shaping a transformation program, what should I be looking for the end game and that target state?
A couple of comments. I'll answer your question, but I'll answer it slightly differently. I think it's not as much an end game as a direction that we're heading in. going to say people, but we do it as well. People like us make the mistake of thinking in terms of, currently in this state, we're going to transform, we're going to arrive at this desired state, and that's it. Then we can go home. It's done, the end of history. Whereas certainly when you're dealing with what the formal term is complex adaptive systems, where the organization just changes all the time, internal, external influences, there's no real end state. So because you can't predict these things, you'd be fooling yourself to say this is the desired end state. It's much better to talk in terms of a direction. And the things that for me characterize the direction of what more of we want, thinking about how the if you're looking at an organization, you've got external and internal stakeholders, looking at all of the stakeholders, thinking from experience, what's the goal of it? What you want is continued willing engagement in value exchange. Continued willing engagement in value exchange. That's this sort of sums it up. You want the stakeholders to engage productively in doing whatever your organization is doing. And of course, some of them have a choice. They can leave if they want. If it's a customer, then go to somebody else. But if it's an employee, there's a degree of coercion. You've signed up for this organization. You've got to use this stupid ERP system. You can't refuse, but you prefer them to do it willingly. And so it's about engagement's the thing. In terms of the kind of experience you'd like people to have, it should be proportional. You shouldn't want people to be delighted when their laptop works when they open it. It's normal. So it's the appropriate degree of both economic benefits, short term, long term, but also the ethical side as well, treating people decently. What's appropriate for this particular situation? And you do have organizations who treat people poorly. But even though it's morally reprehensible, it's a legitimate business case. They've got a monopoly position. They can afford to do it this way. This is the way they choose to do things. The kind of experience that they want differs significantly from other organizations. So it's choosing, being honest about the kind of experience that fits your organization. So that's one of the characteristics of the end state or the end direction. Representation is important, making sure that you hear not only loud voices and voices that are convenient to hear, but also people who are less represented, who have less influence, but are affected by the activities of your organization. Being open to that. Book that we used a word that we used a lot in the ITIL experience book was notice, getting people to notice what's going on. And that word notice we chose carefully because it says something more than measure. Measure sounds factual. Notice is sensing what's going on. Having in this end direction, having people who notice what's happening and are acting as possibly more as ethnographers than engineers, less concerned with how the system's performing, but what it feels to be this stakeholder at this moment in this particular context. Things like this.
No, I've got you. And it's interesting because last week I was speaking to a couple of people that are futuring architects, and they really hit on exactly the same thing you're hitting on in terms of anybody who's focused on a target state and then the transformation is done is probably working in a mindset of the 2010s. And now there's such continuous need to continually change, and not just change in small ways, but change in more quantum leaps, continuously looking at that. And they suggested that the end state needed to be fluid. It needed to flex. And the points you're making, Mark, around those signals, is there anything you can suggest to those listening to the podcast today in terms of how in the role that we may be in IT or any other role, maybe in an organization, how we can notice those signals more? and how we can become people that are looking out and trying to make sense of the world. What would you advise people to maybe consider doing?
It starts, I think, with the leadership. Well, there are two things. You've got two situations. Either you've got, of course, it's not binary. It's on a spectrum. But I'm going to, just to make it binary, either you've got enlightened leadership or you've got leadership living in the dark ages. And as a practitioner, you're dealing with either of them. If you're blessed with enlightened leadership, then they have hopefully given you the space, the trust to act, to exercise your professional judgment, because you don't know how, people are unpredictable. So because you're dealing with unpredictable people, you have to give people a degree of flexibility to say, this time this makes sense, and another time that makes sense. Give people trust, that's one thing. How do you get them to notice? It's part of it. I hope that our book is going to contribute to this, is just making people aware of the phenomenon. For instance, in the book we talk about, I mentioned representation. We use the term filter and favor. If you tell people about their natural bias to filter and favor certain voices, once they're aware of that, if their management has given them a bit of leeway to breathe, then they'll notice these things. It's like when you mentioned, in this room some people are wearing red clothes and some people aren't. I didn't notice that. Just got to make people aware of it. That's how I think that's half of the thing.
Yeah, helping people notice. And I think it is that lifting up and lifting out, isn't it? I think a lot of the transformations that have happened in the past have been dehumanizing us. They've been driving an efficiency agenda, a cost reduction agenda, a standardization agenda. And of course, we all know that as humans, we're all very different and we all like to engage in different ways, and we all have lives that are affecting how we think, feel, act, and what we say. And I think you're right, having enlightened leaders that encourage people to not just process a customer, not just process an internal change request, but actually to consider more about what that person you're dealing with could be dealing with, and to sort of second guess what they might need next. I think is really important. And one thing that definitely resonated with me when we started talking was this concept of making IT feel as good as it functions. Now, you've been in the ITIL space for a very long time. You've contributed to other versions of ITIL. What is it that you think that means we need to amplify this IT feels as good as it functions? And why now for the experience book that didn't previously exist in the ITIL catalogue?
If you think about experience, it's certainly in the IT area. It goes back about 10 years. That's when people started thinking seriously about it. It's only the last couple of years that it's really caught on. Things like the XLA Institute, for instance, who are doing some great stuff, bringing people together, spreading the word. It's just the time. It's funny. It's what you thinking about what people do. Why do people do what they do? I think it depends on three things. It's their knowledge, it's what they know, it's the tools they have, and it's the values that people have, the things they want to do. And the funny thing is, whereas your knowledge and abilities tend to increase over the years, talking about science and technology, really, science, knowledge, it's like a ratchet, it always increases. Same with technology, you get more and more of it. What you see with people's values is that it's a bit like a pendulum. It goes back and forth between democracy and autocratic government, for instance. Back from the Romans and the Greeks, for instance. The Greeks on the authoritarian side, and the Romans democracy. No, other way around. Forgive me, Greeks. Other way around. You see, they're going back and forth. And currently, it's just the way things have gone in our culture. I don't know whether you can explain it, but we are paying more attention to people, just what we do at the moment.
Oh, that's true. I mean, that is true. And I think the other thing that we explored with the experience side of transformation, and maybe we'll come on to transformation broadly, and maybe you can share some of the knowledge from the ITIL transformation book. But if I get back to the experience book, I think what we explored more fully was the fact that, in the world of IT, there is an ecosystem. Many organizations are working with partners, suppliers, vendors to bring a lot of products and services together to the end consumer. And there is, I coined it, I don't think it ever made it into the book, but I coined it experience leakage. That, the different fractions of the organizations coming together, unless they are all at the same level of wanting to drive experience to the end customer, there's leakage in the system. And you were very good at explaining that ecosystem of partners, consumers, agents, and how that all needs to work in the experience space. Do you feel there is more work to be done there in bringing experience up to the same level across the ecosystem, not different parts of the ecosystem addressing it?
I'm not sure. I think there's always going to be inequality, but legitimate. Some pockets of the organisation will benefit more from more investment, and some won't. One thing I did want to share, and that was on the with transformation. Lots of books, including the new ITIL book on transformation, which is really good because it's formulated in terms of being aware of the context, choosing the approach depending on how certain or how predictable the situation is, and the self-correcting mechanism when you discover you're going in the wrong direction, like zigzagging, like with a yacht, self-correcting. So you've got books on transformation, but how to do it more humanely. I think just like we're talking about an end state or an end direction that you want to end up with, I think you should treat the transformation itself in the same way. So it's applying the experience guidance not only to what you're trying to transform, but to the transformation itself, and end up with a transformation process that's experienced as respectful, understandable, participative. People have had the opportunity, you've involved them, they've contributed, they've had the feeling that you've listened to them, that they felt safe enough to share their opinions, really ending up with tying it up to the tagline that we attach to the book, so that the transformation feels as good as it functions, which sort of really sums up the whole idea of experience as far as I'm concerned.
And I think that thing about feeling as good as it functions is transformation is a long tail thing. It's not a quick win. It's continuous, it's hard graft, it drives significant change. And I think that attention to the team spirit, the team participation, the team engagement, often also onboarding new team members and offboarding team members as you go on that transformation journey. Some of that, is a real full-time job for someone on the team to keep that experience side and the human side of the teamwork working to get the results. So Mark, look, it's great talking to you. I've got your book and I know there are many more coming out. I look forward every day when I turn on LinkedIn, there's usually some knowledgeable insight that you're bringing about the world at large. And it really makes me think whenever I see one of your posts or read one of your books.
Yeah, well, a blatant plug. The new book, which is called Only Sure About Doubt, which I thought was a bit of an intriguing title. That's a real cracker. So it's only 65 pages, but it sort of captured who I am, how I approach things, and not that people should want to be me, but it's I think I've captured something about consulting in an uncertain world, and how to make uncertainty productive. I'm publishing lots of quotes on LinkedIn, so keep an eye out for that.
No, I will. And I'll go on to Amazon shortly if it's there and order it. Look, Mark, thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
Lovely to be here.
Whatever Next Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. Find out more at whatevernextbook.com.